Hello and welcome to the Car Doctor podcast and program. My name's John Paul, the Car Doctor, and on today's program, we're going to be talking with Matt DeLorenzo. He's a former editor-in-chief of a whole bunch of publications, including Auto Week and others, and he'll tell us more about that coming up. But if you're thinking about buying an electric car and you're thinking about buying an affordable one, you need to listen to this. With us is Matt DeLorenzo. He is a auto writer, freelance auto writer, who's been sort of around the block a couple times. You have an awful lot of experience with various premium publications, and your last stint was, I believe, you said at Kelley Blue Book, right?
Yes, I worked there for about 8 years, and then I also was editor-in-chief at Road and Track, editor at Auto Week, and then I worked for Automotive News for a number of years. So
Yeah.
just recently retired in January and had time to freelance, and I needed a car, and I realized that I'm a tightwad. All the cars I've driven in my career, I've driven everything from Ferraris to Lamborghinis, all sorts of. But my own personal, upon reflection, I go, you've always bought a cheap car. And I've always had like my first car was a Gremlin, and I just didn't feel the need to spend extravagantly on my own personal transportation, but I thought I wanted to get an electric vehicle. We have a in our household a plug-in hybrid. So I went out and I bought a Nissan Leaf, and I decided, having gone through that experience, that I'd like to write a book. So that's how the book, How to Buy an Affordable Electric Car, Tightwad's Guide to EV Ownership, came into being. Because it's not just shopping for and buying an electric car. It's just the ownership experience is totally different in terms of recharging, on the road and at home, uh, what sort of maintenance you can expect to do, which is very little. What's the insurance costs? All these kinds of how the tax credits work or incentives work. So it's a totally different experience from buying a regular car. So I decided to do this thing as sort of a how-to guide for the average car buyer, and these are people who can't afford a $60,000 Tesla, or the latest and greatest from like a Hummer EV or anything like that. This is for people who want to rely on an electric car for daily transportation, and here's what it's going to take to do that.
And one of the things you talked about was the tax incentives, and a lot of people confuse tax incentive with rebates. They're two separate things.
Correct.
If you don't pay any taxes, tax incentives aren't going to help you a whole heck of a lot, right?
Well, actually, it is a tax credit. Now, you will get a payment from the government. It'll take off, if you owe taxes, it'll cancel that out. But if you're getting a refund, you'll get a bigger refund based on this tax credit you do qualify for. The thing that people don't understand, and Tesla was going, well, our cars only cost so much, or any manufacturer, they
Yeah.
were saying they were deducting the tax credit from the MSRP and saying, oh, you're only going to pay $32,000 for this $39,000 car. No, you have to pay the $39,000, file your taxes, then you get the $7,500.
Right.
So these are the kinds of things that I think the average car buyer just doesn't understand about buying an electric car. And the tax credits are starting to go away. So Tesla no longer is eligible for the federal credit. GM is no longer eligible for the federal credit, and now Toyota is beginning to phase out of the credits. And the fact that happened was kind of weird, because they got the credits for their plug-in hybrids, and they sold so many plug-in hybrids that they used up all their EV credits on those vehicles.
Yeah.
So now that they're selling a pure electric vehicle, the credits are going to go away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a thing that consumers need to take into consideration when they're shopping. Now, even though Tesla and GM can't offer the federal tax credit, they still are eligible for state and local credits. In California here, you can get up to about $27.50 in state. Then that's a rebate. They will send you a check.
Right.
Again, after you've paid full boat for the car and
Yeah.
finished your deal. Um, the other thing about those is that they are means tested in California. So if you make over $135,000 a year, you're not going to get the full credit. And after a certain level, you may be half, and then above $250,000, you won't get it at all.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to consider
Yeah.
when buying a car.
Yeah, here I noticed, I read something just yesterday that in New Jersey they're offering a $400 rebate, a $4,000 rebate all of a sudden if you're going to go buy an electric car to help people go more towards electrification. And like you pointed out, part of the electric car ownership experience is certainly an experience because the electric car ownership is completely different. You don't get to make friends with the folks at the gas station anymore, which is kind of nice for a lot of people. So you're going to charge up at home. For a lot of people too, they're gonna start the day. Unlike most people who drive around with a quarter of a tank of gasoline in the car, they're going to start the day with essentially a full tank of electrons, right?
hmm
So
that's kind of an interesting point. I think that one of the advantages to having an electric car is that it's like having a gas station in your house, but your bathrooms are probably cleaner. But
hopefully,
you can top off. You can top off, and you can start your day with a full charge every day, or you can maybe every other day plug it in, just depending on your use. Um, but there are also considerations on how often you recharge, and these are all factors that a lot of people don't understand about batteries. Is that um, the number of cycles will determine the life of the battery. So if you're constantly topping off or recharging or letting it go too far and charging it, you're going to run into some issues of some battery degradation, or if you're fast charging all the time. So batteries are happiest recharging between 20 and 80% of capacity. So some people say if you're going to top off every night, don't top off to 100%, top off to like 80 or 90%. That'll help your battery life. It'll take a little less time. You're going to be recharging the next day. Maybe you're going to be going a lot farther the next day and you may need the full 100% charge. But there are a lot of different nuances to owning and charging an electric vehicle than it is to just pulling up to a gas pump and filling the tank.
yeah, and the other thing too, I mean, some people who are considering an electric car might say, "Oh, I got to plug it in every day." But think
hmm
about the things you plug in every day. You probably plug in your laptop computer, you probably plug in your
hmm
tablet, you're plugging in your phone. It's just one more thing that you get used to doing, and it becomes
Yeah.
and I'm sure with you, with both your plug-in hybrid and now your electric car, you're just become a creature of habit and just do it, right?
Yeah, and I again, you have to put some extra thought into when you do plug that in, though, because there are a lot of places that charge electricity, on a tiered rate plan. So you're better off maybe charging off peak overnight, that kind of thing. So um, when you plug in and where you plug in, gas costs pretty much the same. I mean, there'll be in a localized area. I mean, out here in California, we're paying $6 a gallon, but with electricity, I can pay as little as maybe 18 to 20 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, my 40 kilowatt hour battery to fill it at that rate is about $8. I go to a public charging station, they could be charging me as much as 40 to 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So all of a sudden that $8 charge becomes $20. So you have to take a lot of that into consideration on where you buy your electricity and when. And range anxiety is a real thing because if you run out of electricity on the side of the road, you're going to have a flatbed tow because you can't get a bucket of electrons to throw into the car to get you home.
Well,
So
we're actually working at
yeah,
that at my full-time job. We're
AAA,
working,
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
we're working.
actually, I have noticed that there are. I just recently, and I'm sure AAA is going to get on this, but there was mobile recharging service I saw here starting up in California.
Yeah.
And if you have that kind of, again, it's just depending on how long it'll take to get enough charge into your vehicle to get you home.
Right.
I go to EV Go, and on a fast charge at 50 kilowatt, I can recharge in about 45 minutes. So if you can get it in about 10, 15 minutes, then it's a great thing, to
Yeah.
come to the
Yeah.
car and give you enough charge to get home. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a local Boston company, kind of his claim to fame is he was on Shark Tank. His name is Josh Aviv, and he has a company called Spark Charge. And basically, what he's doing is he's delivering range to people. And
Mm.
the people from Shark Tank invested $1 million in his company, and he just opened some funding, and I think he collected 23 million now to continue to
Wow.
expand that business to to essentially deliver a charge and deliver range to people. And so
Yeah.
the world is changing the way we know it. And some of it is like you pointed out. Yeah, you could go out and you could buy a $150,000 Lucid or $120,000 Hummer EV, or even kind of the bare bones Rivian is a pretty expensive truck.
Hmm.
But there are cars you can buy that sort of fall into almost the affordable category. Like you said, the Nissan Leaf is one of them, the Chevrolet Bolt. There was a number of them that sort of fit in that category in your book, kind of the cheapskate's guide to electric
Yeah.
vehicles.
Tightwad's guide.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tightwad's guide to
Yeah.
electric
So
vehicles.
among those are things like the Hyundai Kona. Kia has the Niro. So there is this new generation, or this generation of sort of entry level electric vehicles that are worth a look. And I find that the Kona is the most interesting example because they offer a gas version, they offer a hybrid, and they offer a pure electric. So you can get a real apples to apples comparison on what the costs are. And if you get the same SEL trim level of the gas powered Kona, the EV SEL version is $10,000 more.
Hmm.
And therein that tells you how much more expensive, and most of that cost is in the battery, an electric vehicle is versus a conventional gas powered cars. And that's that cost curve that they need to bend down closer to a regular car to make electric vehicles more viable as an everyday purchase by car buyers. So I think a couple of things. One of the points I make in the book is that electric vehicles are not a panacea. They're not going to replace traditional internal combustion engine cars in the foreseeable future, but they are a welcome alternative that you need to consider, given how far you drive, um, what your lifestyle is like, how many cars you have in your fleet, where you live. Those kind of factors can make an electric vehicle can make a difference. Like right now, gas was $6.50 a gallon here in California in some places. Having an EV driving by those gas stations a pretty good feeling. Um, Now, if there's a blackout and I can't charge my car, I probably want to pay 6.50 a gallon for gas to be able to get somewhere, and that's why you would have a plug-in hybrid or a gas-powered car as part of your fleet.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I guess the near future, until maybe charging becomes easier or batteries get longer life or whatever the case is probably going to be that people have an electric vehicle for one car and a hybrid, like you, a plug-in
Yeah.
hybrid, a hybrid, or a gasoline car. And you mentioned the idea of the Kona that you could buy in a EV or a plug-in hybrid or a gasoline version. Are we in sort of the golden age of the automobile now where people have more choices than they ever have with their cars?
I would say so. I mean, the range of options that are available now versus 10 years ago, and the performance levels too are just simply amazing. I wouldn't have dreamed it. And I think there were a lot of people who were saying, well, they're kind of electric vehicle naysayers, and there are people who are fossil fuel naysayers. And I'm saying, let's have all of the above. I mean, fuel cell technology is kind of fascinating to me as well, and there are some fuel cell vehicles available here in California that are interesting technology. So um, there's no telling where it's going to go. I think one of the most important things to look at, though, is that we need a healthier grid. We need a more electricity generating capability in order to support more EVs on the road. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's no cheap or magic bullet here. It's all a question of what do you need, how much can you afford, and what best serves society in the end.
And your book about buying an EV, an affordable EV, um, how are you really trying to help people through this process? Because it's almost like it's a self-help book. It's, you're kind of laying out the facts, you're trying to help people with making their buying decisions, and you're trying to have them not buy the most expensive vehicle on the road because it may not be something they need, and something like your Nissan Leaf, which has a 150-mile range, may be that perfect second car for 90% of the people that need one.
Yeah, I think the most important thing about having a good ownership experience is having your expectations in line with reality. And I think more often than not, people get these ideas in their head that they need 500-mile range or 400-mile range or whatever, and they don't realize that comes at a tremendous cost, and they may never use that. Now, you may have that peace of mind that you're not going to have uh, that kind of range anxiety that somebody who has only 150 miles of range may have. But if I can find a place where I can get a quick charge fairly easily, then that's not that big of a deal, especially if I'm in a local commute situation. So, but again, these aren't flying cars. They're not going to make you look younger. They're not going to get you the girl. They're they're interesting. It's just another way of 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 getting personal transportation, and there's a lot of moving parts in the getting in the owning an EV that you may not consider. It's kind of interesting. I quote a JD Power study. One of the most frustrating parts about owning an electric vehicle is going to a public charging station and the kiosks don't work.
Mm.
And that is a big pain factor because if it's bad. And they were saying that some people were saying, well, I had to wait. Somebody was on there on the charger before me. I had to wait for them to be done before I had another 40 minutes or so to my charging session. But more people reported broken or not in service units as being a bigger problem and a bigger disappointment than having to wait for somebody, knowing that you will be able to get a charge. Because if you've gone to the trouble of find that charger and it doesn't work, now you got to go to the trouble and find a new charger that does work, and where's that? And I got to get there. And so the infrastructure still needs quite a bit of work in order to make EV ownership as easy. And that's the thing, is owning a gas powered car is one of the most convenient um, things possible, because there are plenty of gas stations. It takes 10 minutes to fill up, and you're never going to be stuck uh, by the side of the road because even if you've run out of gas, your friends at AAA will be there to help you get to the next gas station.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I remember years ago when you probably drove the same car. It was a Honda Civic but it was powered by compressed natural gas, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it had 150-mile range or something. And I at the time lived about 60 miles one way from work. And I said, oh, this will be fine. I'll drive to work and I'll fuel up when I get to work. There's a CNG station right near
Sure.
where the office was. I pulled in and it said, closed, go visit us someplace else. And I went to that, and that was behind a gate where you needed an access card to get to it. So now I'm concerned, am I actually going to be able to make it
You
home?
may get
Yeah.
home, right?
And fortunately, there was another CNG station, but I think I rolled into it with about 3 miles left before empty. And
Yeah.
it was a little bit of a panic. So, I think as we have to learn the same thing with electric cars, and one of the things you kind of said about, very frustrating, JD Power pointed out, the EV frustration of getting to a charger with that you find out it's broken. One of the other things I found in my limited test drives with electric vehicles, when I do go to a public charging station, I'm never left alone. It's like, how far does this go? How fast is it? And all of a sudden it's, 30 questions while I'm there trying to make sure I remember how to use the app to get the thing started. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it is sort of interesting. And I think, and I stole this line from somebody once, and I don't even remember who to give it credit to, but um, people that have the most range anxiety are people that have never owned an electric car. The
Yeah.
range anxiety thing seems to go away once you get in the routine of how and when to recharge, right?
Yeah. And again, that's getting your expectations in line with the reality of what the car can do. So you learn to live with it, and you find that you're not going to be putting yourself into those sorts of situations to where you're in a panic mode to get a charge or get
Mm,
home. So,
yeah,
but it's not the same as not thinking about. We all assume that there's a gas station on the next corner,
right.
and that I can always fill up, and that I can always, so. Um, it's just a sort of a learning process.
Yeah, it is. It really
So
is. And you mentioned the charging process, and whether you charge, kind of house current 120 volts or 240 volts, or the high speed charging stations that you see at some shopping malls, which requires nobody has level 3 charging at home. Well,
no, no, no,
maybe out in California somewhere. There's some
no. Well, yeah,
mansion.
there's
Yeah,
probably somebody with
yeah.
megabucks
Yeah,
that can do
yeah.
that. Yeah.
But for the most part, it's going to be kind of level 1 and level 2 charging. But just as you pointed out with tax incentives and that type of thing, there's also tax incentives that go along with home charging, right?
Yeah, they have some tiered rates or special rates, but again, you also have to be they they make sure that if you get that special break, that you're only recharging off peak.
Hmm,
That if you charge during peak hours, you're gonna pay pretty much retail or retail plus.
right.
So they're trying to incentivize you to balance the load on the grid by charging overnight or during early in the morning during off peak
Yeah,
hours. So
yeah.
yeah, those are all things that you have to take into consideration. Some people think, oh yeah, I'll get solar. I'm going to buy a cheap electric car and I'm going to get solar. No, you just spent $20,000 on a cheap electric car, and you're going to spend another $20,000 to put solar panels on your house that won't. I think I quote a website. I can't remember the name, but they were saying it's just it is. I compare trying to use solar. What you have to do is size your solar, and if you needed to size your solar to be able to real time challenge or charge your even a leaf, it would be so big and so expensive that it
Yeah,
defeats the purpose. Solar energy is like collecting rainwater for your household water needs. The sun comes down all day and it collects. If you really want to use that energy, you need to store it in a battery. Now you can store it in a Tesla Powerwall, which will cost you more money. Um, some electric vehicles, they're starting to do like Ford, I think, with the Lightning. You can actually store some of that type of electricity on board and then use that to run your house. So these are kind of the interesting things that electric vehicles open up that aren't available with gas cars. But again, that's a whole nother level of
Yeah.
complexity and
Yeah.
expense that most people aren't going to want to get into.
And the reality of it is, I remember driving and I'm kind of making it up here. I don't know, a 1912 Baker Electric, and yeah,
Hmm.
I think it went 45 miles an hour. It would go about 50
Hmm.
miles between a charge,
Hmm.
and I remember driving a electric car in the 80s that would go about 50 miles an hour and go about 50 miles between charges. So it was about 70 years and there really was no change. It was still lead acid batteries, and
Hmm.
they only did what they did. And the idea that it all sort of stopped for a while. I mean, you can look at the Chevy EV1 as one of the first electric
Hmm.
vehicles, and but just within the last 10 years, the technology's changed pretty quickly, that now electric vehicles, whether it's something like a Chevy Bolt or a Nissan Leaf or the new little Mazda electric vehicle, there are some affordable vehicles that can really take the place of any vehicle you want to drive at highway speeds, zip around town, and most of them, as you pointed out, are compact cars rather than big SUVs, so
Hmm.
they become a little bit more maneuverable. And I guess the real challenge is, people, do Americans really want small cars?
That's the $64,000 question, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it kind of I have in my book I have sort of a buyer's guide, and I break out affordable, tightwad affordable, and then tightwad stretch. The 40 to
yeah,
and a lot of those 40 to $50,000 EVs. Um, that's just for the base model that has maybe 250-mile range. You get the nicer one, you're up over 50 grand. I mean, I
mm,
I kind of laughed when I saw the thing about the Chevy Blazer, and all the articles were saying, well, it's aimed at the heart of the car market because it's $45,000, which is the average price of a car. Well, yeah, that's for a 250-mile range Blazer that's going to cost $45,000 that you're not going to be able to buy until 2024.
mm,
That the first ones that are going to come out are going to be all the expensive ones that have 300-mile range, and they're going to be all more than $50,000.
mm,
So, this whole idea that, and then I heard, oh, they have a 39 nine $40,000 Ford F-150 Lightning pickup. Well, that has 230-mile
mm.
range, and it's not available till next year as well. So all these sort of affordable EVs that they're touting now really aren't quite what they say they are. And we need more Leafs, we need more Konas, we need more Bolts, and they're just not coming. I mean, everybody wants to make the big bucks, and
Yeah,
they're pumping out Lyrics and Hummers and all these other really expensive vehicles, and I think that's setting them up for failure if they don't build more of these vehicles that the average motorist can afford. I I I tell people, I said, our auto dependent society was built on the back of the Model T, not the Cadillac. And until we get more Model T type electric cars, um, it's just, I don't care if you're a politician or an auto manufacturer say we're only going to build electric vehicles. There won't be anybody there to buy them.
yeah. I'm actually going to steal that line and modify it a little bit and say, transportation was based on the Model T, not the LaSalle, and the LaSalle went out of
Yeah,
business.
yeah,
So yeah,
I
so
agree. I, I
yeah,
I think that's the affordable thing. The other thing in there about electric pickup trucks is that if you want a pickup truck to haul stuff or tow things, the last thing you want is an electric pickup truck. And I think the thing is that they hem and haw about what towing or hauling a load does to the range. But I think there was a website that just recently did a trip where they tried to go, I don't know, less than 200 miles towing a trailer, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
I think
and
I read the same story. It was, I think it maybe only went 70 miles or so before it
yeah, yeah.
ran out of electricity. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I do think that electric pickup trucks do have some use, and I think they're changing the way, especially for job sites and things like that. That Lightning, if you take a pickup truck and you drive it so many miles to a job site and use it as a power source, then it makes sense.
Right.
Then I see the utility in a pickup truck like that.
Yeah.
So
No, it really is. And your job where you were editor, Road and Track and Auto Week and all of those, you drove the world's finest vehicles. And you you've had the opportunity to drive, anything, anybody who would dream about, you had the opportunity to drive it. And you settled on sort of a lowly Nissan Leaf, but it fits everything you need, right?
it makes me happy to drive it.
Yeah.
It fits in my garage. It carries, it can carry 5 passengers. It's a hatchback. I can put down the seats. I can throw my golf clubs in there. I drive, you know, in city driving, there's nothing more pleasant to drive than an electric car. It's not noisy. It's smooth. It's very quick off the line. So it has all the attributes that you want. Uh, you know, I think electric vehicles are going to be perfect for people who don't like cars. The driving experience is so seamless and you don't think about it. Um, and so in its own way, it's a very convenient alternative to a gas car. Now it lacks the excitement of an internal combustion engine, the sounds and the feel and that kind of stuff. But you can get that elsewhere. I mean, if
Mm,
that's what you want, you have a recreational car, you have a second car in your fleet. But for everyday driving, it really is uh, a seamless, easy to drive, fun car.
yeah.
So
Yeah. And you
it
say
it
that.
fits all my needs. Yeah.
Yeah, and you say that, if you wanted, that other experience, but most of us don't have a Hellcat in the garage
No.
or a, Corvette or a Lamborghini. Most of us have another car that sort of fits our needs and it's able to,
Right.
go to the home improvement store, and it's really not that much fun to drive either. So the idea that an electric car, and again, I just recently drove the Chevrolet Bolt, and it had an amazing range. It had a great range. I put four adults in
Hmm.
it twice on two different occasions. You fold the seats down. It had pretty good cargo room.
Right.
It was easy to drive, and it was pretty affordable. I think the sticker price on it was 36 or $37,000, which
Yeah.
is cheaper than the last Chevrolet Bolt that I drove.
Yeah. And that's probably for a pretty loaded, like a Premier.
Yeah,
And I got a bare bones one, but I still, I have like a blind spot warning. I have emergency braking on it. There's a lot of things that you get now on cars that we take for granted. I mean, you and I are old enough to remember roll up windows. It's got power windows and power door locks and remote entry and keyless start and all this
yeah,
other stuff,
yeah,
backup camera. So it's not exactly that we've gone back to the dark ages in terms of equipment, um, but it's a basic vehicle and it's basic transportation. It's pretty fun to drive and you don't have to think about it. I don't have to take it in for oil changes. The maintenance is fairly minimal on it. Um, the one thing I think that is going to be annoying for a lot of people is the noises that electrics and hybrids make when they're backing up. They're mandated
yeah,
to make noise. My neighbor she just got a new RAV4 hybrid, and it makes this kind of loud noise when it's backing up. My Leaf is pretty obnoxious. It makes like a pinging sound. It's like
yeah,
it's a destroyer looking for submarines lurking underneath
yeah,
my
yeah.
driveway. It makes this like beeping noise. So, but that's part of the things is that they're so quiet. They want to make sure that people hear them coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So electric cars really are different, but for people who are thinking about it and they're thinking about, well, I think I want to go electric. I think electric might fit my needs. Your book can kind of help steer them in the right direction, give them some suggestions. But you also sound like you've listed all of the positives and maybe some of, I don't want to call it pitfalls, but there are like you pointed out, some negatives to owning an electric car, that you're not
Right.
going to be able to drive, 3,000 miles across country and stop every 300 miles at a gas station and fill up. It's going to take a little bit more careful planning to get that to happen. Not to say it can't happen, but it's going to take a little bit more planning to get that to happen. And you sort of take everybody through, or the prospective buyer sort of through, here's what it could be like, and consider you prospective buyer kind of behind the wheel of owning the car, and what
Right.
it's going to be like to own it, right?
Right, and I think that that's the thing. If you if you live in a condo or an apartment building with and you don't have a dedicated parking space with access to electricity, you probably don't want an electric car. You may want a hybrid,
Hmm.
but you probably don't want an electric. If you do have access to charging at work where they give it to you complimentary, you might be able to make it work. But on the weekends, you're kind of on your own, and or you're relying on public charging. If you live in a Montana, for instance, or any other far-flung suburb, and you have a long commute, you don't want an electric. You want a
Yeah.
gas car.
Yeah.
So like I said, they're not for everybody, but there are more people than not who might want to consider going electric because right now, given the incentives, given the rebates and what's going on in terms of gas prices, um, it may save you a couple of bucks. So it is worth looking at as an alternative to what you've been doing.
So when you're driving your Leaf and you see somebody standing in front of a pump pumping $7 gasoline, do you secretly just sort of smile to yourself?
No, I feel sorry for them.
Uh,
But I still have another car that I got to put gas into. So I don't, I do feel their pain, but not as much.
Not as much.
But it is kind of it is uh, less, you don't have to
Yeah.
think about going to a gas station. Now, if you miss, getting Slim Jims and a Mountain Dew, then yeah, uh, you still may want to stop
Yeah.
at a gas station to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. 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 Nothing like healthy eating. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could say I probably lost 15 pounds since I stopped going to the
Yeah.
gas station.
Yeah. But you are absolutely right. I live in a essentially a what some people would consider a tiny house on Cape Cod. It's very small. It has a small electrical service. It only has a 100 amp electrical service, and the nearest level 2 charger is not far away, but it's at a hotel and it's only available for guests only. For me to be able to actually go charge, I need to drive about 18 miles to a mall, and
Hmm.
which is not one of the places I really enjoy going, is to malls.
Yeah.
So the idea of going there to charge up my car is a little bit of an inconvenience. So, like you pointed out, for a lot of people, they can't just immediately say, "I want an electric car. I'm going to go get an electric car," and then find out your house isn't set up for it, your neighborhood isn't set up for it.
Right.
It may not be that convenient. Like you said, the condo owner, the apartment renter, electric cars may not be perfect for them, and but it still could be something that could be workable depending on
Hmm.
what you're doing and how you're going to do it. So it's great you've kind of taken the public through all of this, and really kind of broken down some of the cars that are available in kind of a more affordable range, and also
Hmm.
thinking about the rebates and the incentives that are available to help people buy these vehicles. And like you pointed out, don't these rebates and incentives change constantly. They could
Hmm.
go away, but they could come back There could be a state
Yeah,
incentive. There could even be some big municipalities, some cities and towns may offer something that could help make that electric car a little bit more affordable as well. So
right,
all of these things
right.
can work. And one thing I will remind people about is sort of the fine print of charging. I've been to some charging stations where the first $2 are free, or the first 2 hours are free, and then the you know third hour on up might be $5 or $6 an hour. And what they're trying to do is keep you from leaving your car parked at a restaurant all day. And so read the fine
Yeah,
print on the charging station, I guess, too.
yeah. That's a very good point because again, that's one of those little things that people don't realize that when you're charging a vehicle, they may charge you, it may be free or they may charge you. But once your charging session is done, they want your car out of there so that it's available for the next person. You could pay as much as $60 an hour for literally parking your car and not getting a charge. So, and the other interesting, and this is
Well, I
kind
was
of,
gonna say in Manhattan, it's probably cheaper that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
probably is. The other interesting thing is I got with my car, with my Leaf, my Tightwad Leaf, I got this charging cord, and it has an adapter to be able to plug into 120, and it has a 240 outlet plug on it. Some manufacturers aren't giving you that cord anymore. Like some of the Korean,
Mm,
like the Ioniq 5, some of these vehicles don't come with that cord, and those things cost about $200.
yeah.
So that's in addition to even, if you want your own portable charging cord, they're making you pay for that, and I don't think that's right. I think that you should get that as part of the purchase price of the vehicle. But there are all these little things that are going on that people don't realize. And when you're shopping for electric car, there's a lot of you got to know the right questions to ask, and in order to get a good deal and make sure that you'll have a car that'll fit your needs and give you a long life and good service.
Well, Matt, I think we helped explain a lot of this. Can you tell us where we can find your book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, both the Kindle version and the paperback version. And then for Nook owners, it's on Barnes and Noble as an ebook there. I'm still working to get the paperback version on Barnes and Noble, but if you want the paperback version, you can find it on Amazon.
And one more time with the title of the book, so we know what to
It's
look
How to
for.
Buy an Affordable Electric Car, a Tightwad's Guide to EV Ownership.
Well, it sounds like for somebody who isn't ready to go out and spend $150 on a Lucid Air or a Cadillac Lyric or a Tesla Model X long range vehicle. It sounds like a good place to start. And like a lot of things in life, I'm sure we're also going to see as the technology changes. Um, you know, I remember the first digital calculator I bought, and I think all it did was add and subtract and multiply and divide, and I don't know, it cost $60 or something. And now they give them away with business cards stuck on the back of them. So
Yeah.
technology is going to change, and we probably won't see really inexpensive electric cars. But well, I think the more we see popularity, and it is a little bit of the chicken and the egg kind of thing, as the demand starts to spool up, it looks like we'll probably see prices start to come down.
Hopefully, and uh, like I said, I think that there's a place for EVs. They just have to be more affordable for
Yeah,
people to
yeah,
to really embrace the
yeah.
technology.
Yeah, and sort of, my thoughts, that hybrid garage, that sort of,
Hmm.
you have the EV on one side, and you have the gasoline or gasoline hybrid on the other side. So you have the car that,
Best
if
of
you,
both worlds.
yeah, best of both worlds, so you can do what you want. And if you do it right, the gasoline car stays parked most of the time, so you're not spending, five, six, $7 a
Right.
gallon in gasoline. And it's amazing how you can find how much you can do with even an electric car that only has 150-mile range. Like you're finding out, it
Right.
meets your needs 90% of the time.
it comes down to being able to have the freedom to go where you want to go, when you want to go, and having both allows you to do that.
There you go. And again, one more time, the name of the book and where to find it.
How to Buy an Affordable Electric Car, a Tightwad's Guide to EV Ownership, and you can find it on Amazon, paperback and Kindle version, and on Barnes & Noble as a Nook ebook.
Matt, thanks for your time, and
Okay.
best of luck. Best of luck with the book.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, John Paul.
I want to thank Matt for joining us today on the Car Doctor broadcast. And again, check out his book. You can find more information at all your popular book vending sites. And of course, you can always join me on all of the social media. John Knows Cars on Facebook, at John F. Paul at Twitter, at John F. Paul at Instagram. You can see the pictures of the cars that I've been driving lately. And of course, you can find all the podcasts just where you found this one or other popular podcast sites. The main podcast site is johnfpaul.podbean.com. So until next time, make sure you wear your seatbelt, drive safely, and be good to your car. And if you see an emergency vehicle by the side of the road, slow down or move over. It saves lives.